Welcome to the CODELIFE Podcast with me, Carl Beach, and my great mate, Nathan Blackerby.
Hello, mate.
Any soldier who knocks out his commanding officer while drinking with him in a public bar and then escapes unpunished clearly must have outstanding virtues. This is the story of Major Anders Lassen, VC, MC, 2 bars, 1920 to 1945. It's from a book called Supreme Courage, Heroic Stories from 150 Years of the Victoria Cross by General Sir Peter de la Billiere, who spent much of his armed forces career in the Special Forces. Frederick Forsyth said of de la Billiere, few authors have the sheer authority of General Sir Peter de la Billiere. He was a professional soldier for most of his life and spent most of that period as an officer in Special Forces. He has won an array of medals for courage under fire and has no need to imagine a dry tongue of mortal fear or the adrenaline rush of combat victory. This is a book that demonstrates in clear, soldierly language just why, despite our age of rampant iconoclasm, the British Armed Forces still retain the nation's affection and respect. Anders Lassen did just this, escape unpunished after knocking out his commanding officer, flattening Major the El Jellicoe without warning in a drinking den in Tel Aviv, because he took exception to something that had been said. Jellicoe, though in his own words rather surprised, forgave him, not wanting to have been court-martialed and so lose the services of an invaluable fighting soldier, a morally courageous piece of insight on his part. Lassen was extraordinary in many ways, a tall, blonde Dane whose devastating good looks and normally smiling demeanour concealed a ruthless killer. He was dedicated to the extermination of his country's enemies, the Germans. He is the only member of the SAS ever to have been awarded a Victoria Cross, which, with his 3 military crosses, made him the highest decorated SAS soldier, although Colonel Paddy Mayne, with 4 distinguished service orders, all for gallantry, ran him close. Lassen came from warrior stock. His grandfather, Axel Lassen, made a fortune from tobacco in the Dutch East Indies, married into the Schouw family, one of Denmark's great military clans. Anders was born on the 22nd of September 1920 at Hoosingsgaard, a fine country house with 50 rooms and a pillared portico near Mern in South Sealand. But when he was 9, the family moved to another manor house, Beckerskopf, only 10 miles away, which stood on high ground with open grassland sloping away in front towards marshes and the sea. It was there he grew up, running loose in the surrounding estate with his younger brother Franz and their Great Dane Rufus. His mother Suzanne, who made a name as an author of children's books, often lost track of the boys for days and nights on end, and only when she looked out of her window and saw a column of smoke rising could she tell where they had camped out with bundles of spruce branches for their beds. So this was a guy who went on to become a warrior, and clearly the foundation of his life was running loose on this vast estate where his mum just gave up, like the boys are gone.
That's cool.
And it says this here. It's interesting, isn't it, how foundational years of your life can coalesce to a moment, which is certainly what happened for this guy. Back to the book. The freedom with which Anders roamed the woods and fields surely encouraged the wild elements in his character, and at the same time developed his fieldcraft and shooting skills, which saved his life on many occasions during the Second World War. He was quick in everything he did, with almost animal-like reactions, and Magnus, husband of the housekeeper at Beckerskopf, remembered that he could go down the stairs in the main building as quick as lightning and without a sound. He was like a panther. A second and he was down. From an early age, he was a killer, his favourite weapon being a bow and arrow, with which he achieved phenomenal accuracy, explaining that he never really aimed, but simply looked where he wanted his arrow to go, as if throwing a stone. He could hit birds on the wing, fish in the water, and running targets from mice to full-grown fallow bucks. Another prized possession was his hunting knife, which he sharpened fanatically and threw with deadly precision. In school, he had little time for lessons and distinguished himself only in running. At the first opportunity, he left and signed on as a cabin boy aged 18 aboard a Fionia, which sailed for Bangkok in January 1939. So it's interesting. He comes from rich stock,
Yeah.
but he just wants to be out. He just wants to adventure. He just wants to be out
Wild,
there.
isn't he?
He's not ambitious. He's just wild. He's a wild guy.
Yeah, I like that.
Hits a bird on a ring with his fire arrow.
Amazing.
Yeah. When the ship returned to Copenhagen in May, he went back to Beckerskov, where he left an indelible impression on a friend, Veronica Fixelt. I remember very clearly, she said, his incredible beauty, the looks of a perfect hero, but I was repelled by his aggressive, macho behaviour. He had a gun and was shooting gramophone records to pieces, using them as clay pigeons. So, this is just a very interesting character, and I'm taking chunks of this book. I'm not reading all of it but I recommend you get this. He basically carries out some mutiny in the Persian Gulf. He's proceeding on his boat to Colombo, where Lassen tried to enlist in the Royal Air Force but was rebuffed, being told that foreigners are not wanted. His spirits lifted when the ship was fitted with a 4.7-inch anti-submarine gun, and he was given some instruction in firing it. But in Cape Town, he deliberately made himself so objectionable that he got himself paid off. Wow. And in 1940, he joined the crew of the British Consul, an English tanker. Ends up in Oban in the northwest of Scotland. And we read, still his ambition was to join the RAF, but after hanging around for 2-3 weeks in Newcastle, he met a young second mate called Hammer, who suggested they should go to London that night to join the army. To hell with your army, Lesson told him. I want to be an airman. Nevertheless, he agreed to go. And so met Captain Michael Iverson, who had served in the Danish army during the First World War and who was now recruiting young Danes to fight for their country. On 25th of January 1941, along with 14 others, Lassen swore an oath on the Bible, sword in hand, pledging loyalty to their king, Christian IV, and vowing they would fight together with their allies for the liberation of Denmark from foreign yoke. After an initial diversion, in which he tried to return to the sea, he found himself training with a small group of his countrymen at Aritseg, a desolate wilderness of bog, rock and mountain on the west coast of the Scottish Highlands. Although the young Danes did not know it, they were under assessment by SOE, Special Operations Executive, the secret organisation which trained agents and infiltrated them into occupied countries as saboteurs and spies. The commando training at Aritseg was notoriously hard. Forced marches through the fields, rock climbing, swimming, live firing, landings on the coast. Then and later, Lassen could outwalk any of his companions. He was outstandingly fast and fit, and had an extraordinary power of moving so stealthily in the dark that he seemed to make no contact with the ground. One day he caused a minor sensation by killing a red deer stag with his knife. An account of the incident given to his mother by one of his contemporaries does not quite ring true. The man claimed that Lassen spotted 2 stags 50 yards off, shouted, "I want that one," ran round some small patches of bushes, got up close and stabbed the animal to death. Anyone who knows Highland deer may well doubt the accuracy of this report. If Lassen had shouted in 50 yards, the stag would have been away like the wind, unless it was ill. It seems more likely in character that the beast was lying down asleep. He stalked it carefully. In any case, the feat immediately confirmed his reputation as a lethal hunter who possessed exceptional skills in fieldcraft. Now just read this bit, because the next bit is very interesting. But, I'm adding the but myself. When it came to drill, his performance was less satisfactory. Itching for action, he had no time for square bashing, and kept complaining that he had joined the army to fight, not to prance around a parade ground. He was becoming more and more difficult when, luckily for all concerned, he was taken on by Captain Gus March Phillips, who with his second-in-command Geoffrey Appleyard had been given permission by Sir Colin Gubbins, the executive head of SOE, to form a small unit and train it for guerrilla operations. And then the story is told of how they get their first venture on a Brixton trawler called a Maid of Honour, and they do some raids and various other bits and pieces, and they see their first elements of action. It's just the interesting thing for me about this. We're obviously reading here about a man who was born he had warrior spirit, had that wild thing. Now, clearly, in the military, there's discipline, the deconstruction and reconstruction of young soldiers, the polishing the shoes, the parades, the endless discipline, the drills.
Routine,
But this guy is not fit for that. So I just wonder, here's the thing. what if this SOE guys had not spotted him?
Mm.
What if they thought this guy's just useless at the discipline stuff? Because some people are.
Mm.
I mean, we're not conformists.
No.
But if we put into a conformist situation, we'll come across as less than what we are.
Yeah.
What would have happened to this guy if he'd not been spotted?
Yeah.
You can't make everyone conformist, can you?
No, I don't think so. Not when he's shown that kind of level of aptitude for hunting.
Yes.
I mean, to run about with a bow and arrow to hit anything you aim at, and to be able to stealth kill a deer. I mean, that's mad.
Yeah.
That is serious ability.
Yeah, I mean, he is to all intents and purposes, it's being shown out. He's the perfect killer. He's the perfect hunter, isn't he?
Yeah.
There's something about this guy that is different. But what if he'd not been spotted? What I'm saying is that we tried to make everyone conform.
Yeah.
Everyone's got this uniformity about culture, and I think we're getting better at that. But
yeah.
I think we've got to learn how to embrace the mavericks, right?
Especially the guys who really don't fit, who just love the wilderness, who love aggressive things, or do you know what I mean? There are blokes out
which
there
we now calling toxic masculinity.
I think so.
Yeah.
But it's not though, is it? It's just another form of.
Yeah, I'm developing some strong views around this toxic masculinity at the moment, and more men are in prison, more men die through violence, more men die in wars, men are more likely to kill themselves. I think toxic masculinity probably applies to a small proportion of guys who are out there, bullies, overly aggressive. Women are ascending in the professions quite rightly, and education and law and medicine. Yes, there's pay issues, but I don't even think that's been drilled into correctly. I just think masculinity is under attack, unless you need us to die in a war. I could say more, but some of us are blokes.
There certainly is. There's certainly guys like that who just thrive on hunting, outside living,
and some women, I guess.
Yeah, of course.
But hey.
But you're right. That sausage machine of conditioning.
And there's cultural. There's I think quite a poor cultural thing happening now, where if you're anything like this, you are evil, toxic.
There is a bit of a lynch mob go after the kind of guy who looks like that.
Yeah.
But 100%. A war needs men like that.
Yeah.
But peacetime struggles.
There's an interesting conclusion in this book. You bear with us. There's an interesting statement right at the end of this chapter, which would be good to explore. Back to the book. Yeah. Training included the frequent use of explosives, grenades, pistols, submachine guns, but Lassen was particularly fascinated by methods of silent killing, especially with a knife or his favourite weapon, a bow and arrow. In a personal plea to the War Office, he argued the merits of bows and arrows, claiming that a trained archer could fire up to 15 noiseless shots per minute and kill without shock or pain. So it is unlikely, shall we say, that a man would scream or do anything like that, he wrote to the War Office. The official reaction was typical. The War Office sent down 2 bows and arrows but gave no permission for them to be used against the enemy.
Wow.
Howard felt that Lassen had a real hatred of Germans and wanted to get at them by any means he could. His colleagues sensed that the only way he could work off such bitter enmity would be killing them with a knife, with arrows, or with his bare hands. 4 nights later, Lassen was in action, one of a 6-man team that carried out reconnaissance of the Channel Islands of Borneo. The rocky outcrop turned out to be uninhabited, but Lassen's participation in the raid earned him a weekend pass. And so it was on the night of Saturday 12th September he was off duty in Bournemouth, when March Phillips led yet another raid on Normandy, Operation Acquittant. This is interesting. Lassen spent that night with friends called Knight, who reported that after dinner he was restless. He kept pacing about and peering out at the weather. He slept on a divan in the sitting room, but suddenly in the middle of the night he gave a loud yell. When Mrs. Knight went to see what the matter was, he told her he was convinced his commanding officer had been killed. His premonition proved to be accurate. Acquittant went hideously wrong. The raiders had hardly gone ashore, but they were detected by a dog belonging to a German patrol, and after a vicious firefight they were driven off. 8 were captured, 3 killed, including March Phillips. He goes on to talk about the battle, which we won't go into now, to suggest you read the book. But again, this is just a very interesting comment on this guy. There's something about him which is otherworldly.
Yeah.
Isn't there? There's, and you can't quite pin down what's going on here. Is that demonic? Is it, I mean, what is that? But he knew, and he had this incredible instinct and fighting ability. And I'm not going to go too far in that. I just find it's interesting. It's just very, very interesting. In 1943, back to the book, Lassen's reputation reached the ears of 24-year-old El Jellicoe, son of the celebrated First World War admiral and himself a distinguished operational soldier who was to win the DSO and MC with the SAS. Jellicoe was home on leave from the Mediterranean, where he had recently established the SBS, an offshoot of the original SAS. And no sooner had he interviewed Lassen than he invited him to join. So it was that Lassen went out to the SBS training base at Athlit, south of Haifa, on the coast of Palestine. And on one night when he went drinking at a bar in Tel Aviv, he laid his new commanding officer out cold. As Jellicoe recalled, I must have said something that offended him and ignited his quick fuse. And 2 or 3 minutes later I found myself getting up from the floor, having already discerned exceptional qualities of leadership in his hot-headed recruit. Jellicoe simply took him back to camp, where Lassen apologised. Many less perceptive officers would have resorted to the manual of military law and the war, and the SAS would have lost a unique fighting soldier to the cells. Now, something interesting there about leadership and coping with people who are different. I've always said I think a mature organisation is able to cope with mavericks and misfits and tolerates infringements of rules. I mean, obviously knocking someone out cold, but they're fighting men in the middle of a war. So this is a different time, it's a different age. I mean, you wouldn't have that in the CVM office if one member of staff decks another one, they're out the door, aren't they? But this is a different time. But there is this thing here about conformity again.
There's a bit of a underlying kind of spiritual dynamic here as well, that I think we're in a culture where if a guy displays those types of characteristics, so it doesn't have to be a fighter, but like the tribal type guys, like the blokes who are in the stands every Sunday watching their team and absolutely engrossed in cheering their tribe on, or the blokes who absolutely love UFC, love fighting and love that sort of moment of, I'm going to get this aggression out, I think there's a spiritual subtlety there that we almost feel like, well, those guys need Jesus and they won't want those things. But I love Jesus and still enjoy those things.
Well, there's an interesting thing here where it says in the book, there was an immense difference between Lassen off duty, a vague, gentle charmer with a soft spot for dogs and kids, and Lassen in action. Then, in the words of a radio script written by his colleague Commander Adrian Seligman, he was brave with a calm, deadly, almost horrifying courage, bred of a berserk hatred of the Germans who had overrun his country. He was a killer too, cold and ruthless, silently with knife or point-blank range with pistol or rifle. On such occasion there was a froth of bubbles around his lips and his eyes went dead as stones.
So he could be borderline
psychopath
here. I mean,
there's something not right.
Yeah, there's something not right. I mean, if you are that bloodlust taken over in your mind that you want to get up close and
it says here,
someone.
Once he got going he'd kill anyone. He was frightening in that way, and his view of Germans is even more personal than ours. It says here, I do not know that if he had the opportunity he'd kill someone with a knife rather than shoot. He says here, it's difficult to assess if the killing instinct used the war as an excuse or whether it sprang from a genuine hatred of the enemy. I think he was, personally, having read this story through a few times now, I think there is the maverick, the misfit, the talent, the gift, and then there's psychopathy.
In there, mixed in.
Yeah, and it's spotting that, isn't it? But in war, he found an outlet. Now, there is an interesting conclusion, as I said, coming up. But he was disciplined. He himself said, he recorded a severe verdict on some of his men. Hard training must be substituted for a lack of experience. He was a driven man. He was, very disciplined. But there was psychopathy. It says here, his mother said, back to the book, he could easily have spent the rest of the war in Greece up harm's way, but his demon drove him on, she said. It was as if a fever were burning within him. He remembered the American medical orderly Sergeant Porter Jarrell. He defied death and exposed himself to the greatest dangers. He was a restless dynamo charged with energy. He had to do something to translate his thoughts into action. Life had become a race against death. He drove his jeep like fury. He drank big gulps, as if he were thirsty, trying to find everything there was in life in a wild chase after fleeting happiness. but then a strange calm would settle over him as though he'd lived forever and knew everything. There's some real borderline thing going on here, isn't there?
Interesting though to see how a man was wrestling with that in a time when you're going back 70 years. I mean, it wasn't as understood, was it? He was like a maverick in a different time.
Yeah.
And like that man today wouldn't be understood. It would be processed, and
yeah.
I do reflect a lot of what you're reading with, almost like David in the Bible. Maybe we'll pick this up once you've finished reading the bits. But there is that shepherd warrior.
Yeah,
there's
played his harp, sung.
Yeah.
I
But
mean, it's definitely
cut people down.
Well, I just can't wait to get to this weird. There's this weird sentence at the end of this book. It really jolted me. Anyway, he's now in Italy. He's constantly in warfare, special operations, and he is a out and out barehanded killer.
Yeah.
All our success came from stealth, but we are now used for infantry assault. That, considering our type of soldiering, was suicide mission. We were rushing along with him in front, blowing his whistle and shouting, come on, forward you. What's it? Get on, get forward. Ignoring the acute danger, Lassen ran on again, attacked the second pillbox with grenades, killing the occupants. And just after he had cleared it, Stevenson caught up with him, and during a temporary lull in the fighting, they got down behind a slight rise in the road. But then Lassen thrown all his grenades, so he borrowed more, hurling them at the third pillbox. They captured 2 prisoners, and Lassen shouted out in German for the occupants to surrender. Someone called back "Kamerad," an ambiguous response, and Lassen told the rest of his men to stay where they were, stood up, went forward. There was a single burst of machine gun fire, then silence. To Stevenson, the silence seemed to last 20 minutes. In fact, it was only a few seconds. Then he heard SBS, Major Lassen wounded, here. He found him lying beside the pillbox entrance and tried to drag him away, but he was too big and heavy. Who is it? Lassen asked. Steve. Good. A pause. And then, Steve. I'm wounded. I'm going to die. Stevenson pulled out a morphine tablet and put it on his tongue. Morphine, he told him. We're going to take you back to the boats. No use, Steve, Lassen muttered. I'm dying, and it's been a poor show. Don't go any further with it. Get the others out. So, right there, this isn't the bit I want to build up to, but interesting, that right there at the end, he wasn't so for the bloodlust he'd lead all his men to his death. There are some soldiers we'll read about going along who would, like Chesty Puller would like order fire onto his own men.
Yeah.
But he's like, no, now it stops.
So what happened there? He rushed forward to this machine gun.
There was one of the Germans called out "Kamerad," i.e. like I might be surrendering. So Lassen said, well, I'll go and investigate, and he got shot down.
Wow, suckered him in.
Suckered him in and killed him.
He died there, did he?
Yeah, so it says Stevenson tried to lift him, but both men were entangled in a telephone line. Lassen collapsed unconscious. By the time another SBS man came up, he was dead. What it says in the citation for Lassen's VC, this is 7th of September 1949. After an account of the night's actions, it concluded, by his magnificent leadership, complete disregard of his personal safety, Major Lassen had, in the face of overwhelming superiority, achieved his objects. 3 positions were wiped out, accounting for 6 machine guns, killing 8, wounded others of the enemy, 2 prisoners taken. The high sense of devotion to duty and esteem in which he was held by the men he led, added to his own magnificent courage, enabled Major Lassen to carry out the task he had been given with complete success.
Wow.
Now this. One cannot help wondering what he might have done or become had he survived the war. In peacetime, his temper might still have been a problem, but his extraordinary wartime experiences would surely have mellowed his sharp and abrasive characteristics. He might just have gone on fighting as a mercenary. He might just have found fulfilment in charity work. It's such an interesting line. He might also, as Lord Jellicoe, who knew him well as anyone, except perhaps David Southern told me, have played a leading role in politics or diplomacy, which is about bringing peace and resolution. He had an astonishing talent for doing things which really interested him. He loved his country, and I believe he would have played an important role in Danish affairs. His mother Suzanne published her moving memoir Anders Lassen, VC, in 1965, and ended her book with the words, I feel that I owe it to him not only to be thankful, but also happy that he, in the short time he was allowed on this earth, was to his country a courageous warrior, and to us a good and loving son. So you've got here in this very complex character, the wildness, the maverick, the untamed, unbridled guy who knocks his commanding officer out and yet loves dogs and kids and could be tender.
Yeah.
And then de la Billiere, an out-and-out warrior himself, professional soldier, says he would probably have excelled or been drawn towards charity work. I just find that a very... It sort of goes against the grain of everything else you read about him. And obviously we just taking little chunks of the book.
It's a real mixture, isn't it?
Yeah. So, warrior shepherd.
I think so. I think
fascinating idea, isn't
it? Yeah. I was talking to a soldier mate of ours, Dave Hearn.
Yeah.
And he sort of put that in my head before, this warrior shepherd thing. And if you look at it, like, churches are very orientated around developing and building and maintaining the shepherd heart.
Yes.
Aren't they?
Yeah.
Gentle, caring.
Yeah.
Watch the flock.
Yeah.
Give yourself up for the flock.
Yeah.
Kind, gracious, humble, all of that.
100%.
But the warrior side of masculinity, if you like, or men, however you want to word it, that, how do we communicate to that in the church setting? I don't know that we do. I think it's almost seen as a bit of a bad thing.
Yeah.
Why would you want to punch up? Why would you feel that aggression towards something? Why do you?
You know, I channel my aggression towards Satan.
And injustice, right?
And injustice. And the poor, rescuing the poor and the broken. And
which you put into practice.
Try to. So, yeah, I probably am on the aggressive side of leadership.
But you're also aggressive with your generosity, aren't you?
Try
it comes
to.
at a cost.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
And
there's time.
You put a fight in there as well.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to
time, money,
pay
finance.
Yeah.
Interesting people.
Yeah.
Yeah, go at it. And
but that's interesting, because we don't have. I personally don't feel, because I've been a Christian since I was like 6, and I've been brought up in church. I've led a church, and it's quite a unique thing to come across a church that enables men to experience that shepherd heart and that warrior heart.
Yeah.
To enable men to find a punch up, a spiritual punch up, let's say.
Spiritual dust up, yeah.
And measure it and say, right, we've come through that skirmish, let's go on to the next one.
Yeah, and churches need strong, courageous leaders, I believe.
So what?
And ministries do.
So what is it that is it the language or the ability of leaders in church to facilitate that effectively for men? I mean, what is it that's missing? Because I've not experienced it really at church. It's very, like me and my brother used to laugh because there's always a bloke on the door that meet you with a wet handshake. Do you know the sort of mean? You put your hand forward and he grabs your fingers.
I don't know, mate. I mean, I've been trying to wrestle with this for many years now, and I know some of our thoughts are not popular out there. But I think for many years I felt a conformity to not be the man that I am. And you know, I know that we are being changed into the likeness of Christ, but I think even that has been manipulated to be slightly on the soft side of things, whereas Christ could be quite decisive and at times incredibly confrontational. But I've found a pressure to conform to a more genteel, polite, non-confrontational style of leadership, which I've junked.
Which by nature isn't yourself.
No, it's not me. So kind, I seek to be. Generous, yes. Gracious, time for people, but decisive. And there's a time for action and a time for confrontation and time for radical honesty and there's a time for toughing it out.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of leadership training doesn't prepare people for toughing it out through tough times. But not all the church finds that palatable, right? Yeah. Because we've there's a cultural overlay. Of
shepherdness.
Yeah, overly shepherdness.
I think so. But the blokes that we speak to, we talk straight, we talk honest.
Yeah.
We're not sugarcoating the gospel and not sugarcoating the how high the bar is for us. We're setting it high. We want to live lives that really reflect Christ.
Or maybe there's different sorts of leadership. Maybe the church requires shepherds and ministries require warriors.
Maybe. I guarantee there's blokes out there feeling that though. that they've learnt a shepherd heart, but deep down there's this suppressed maverick, there's this suppressed warrior.
Yeah, we don't hold that back.
No, refuse to hold that back.
Yeah, well, I don't even think about that anymore. I want to be authentic. So I want to be the man that God's made me to be, and I totally accept that some people
won't like it.
No, and some people are not made like that, but I am, and I meet many men that are.
Yeah.
And I can't apologise for my masculinity.
No.
But it doesn't mean I'm not tender to my daughters. Of course it doesn't. Does it mean I can't cry? Of course I can cry, you know. Of course I can have a soft heart. I'm thinner skinned than people think, but I'm tough-minded.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It is interesting because it's a real necessity for the gospel to reach these blokes.
Yeah.
That are totally off the church radar, that look in and think, I don't want the shepherd heart.
No.
You've misunderstood who I am. I don't want to conform to that message.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that mean they don't want Christ? Not at all.
Yeah.
Because he led and empowered the Mavericks, didn't he?
Yeah.
Like the Brothers of Thunder and Peter. They didn't always get it right.
No.
But he gave them space.
Gave them space to grow,
to express who they were.
Exactly. And I totally believe that.
Is there a pitfall where we get into where we say, like, I need to be more like Christ and less like myself? And actually, I'm trying to say it like, what would Christ do in this situation? What would Jesus do if he was me now? That doesn't take away anything. Like, I'm still me. I'm still Nathan. I'm still the person Christ made me to be.
Yeah.
But I'm seeking to be led and guided by him, not to look exactly like him, and because I've still got to be me.
Yeah, and your journey or the way you were brought up and everything all feeds into it.
All feeds in. Yeah.
We can't be clones, but the opposite spirit takes courage. Facing trials takes courage. Loving your enemies takes courage. Taking a hit on behalf of the gospel takes courage.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be the wet handshake guy.
No. And I think there is a time, like Ecclesiastes says, isn't it? It's a time for everything.
Yeah.
There's a time to be the bloke who wants to be out in the wild, and there's a time to be the bloke who's sitting tenderly and listening to his daughters sob about a boyfriend,
which I've done.
There's a whole spectrum, and we'll
continue to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I'm tender to my wife. Interestingly, Karen got someone emailed her a message, and one of the things she picked up on was the way I speak tenderly about my wife, and they were saying how does Karen do that her husband would speak like that, because she's a very gracious person. But I can speak tenderly to my wife, and I don't like it when I see men not being kind to their wives. Because that's a wrong masculinity. Yeah, it's not refined. It's not been purified. So we're not saying don't be tender, don't be kind, don't be gracious, don't be loving, don't be romantic. We're not saying that. Yeah. But it's the warrior shepherd blend, isn't it?
It's interesting though how
some people are more warrior and some people are more shepherd.
Yeah, exactly.
Fine.
Yeah, fine.
Absolutely fine.
Get on with it.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. Any dialogue about that gets shut down as toxic.
And the attack dogs come in,
And I think it's a real shame. So we just have to live it out.
But I actually think, mate, I'm going to go as far as to say it is reprehensible for people to be saying that masculinity is toxic, to use that language, and get away with it all the time. Yeah. Because you're not going to get an argument going. You're not going to get you're going to get an argument going. You're not going to get progress and dialogue. Yeah. If we were to say femininity is toxic, man.
Yeah.
So I think that's got to stop.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Get the dialogue. Get the dialogue going.
But
we'll listen. But
tell you what, we are seeing. We are seeing, and I don't want to use the word army, but a movement of men that actually, if we can't dialogue on the Twitters and in the social medias, and we're just going to live this out.
We are going to live it out.
We're going to live it out in our homes.
Here's my experience of men, and I've specialised in working with men now for many, many years, over 2 decades, way over 2 decades.
Got a passion for men, haven't you, mate?
Passion for men, great passion for men. I'm with men on their own. They talk about their kids.
Yeah.
They talk about their wives. They talk tenderly about their families.
Yeah.
And there's this thing out there. You just talk about football and beer and cars. No. We'll be out tonight for a beer. We talk about our families. We talk about our relationships. Yeah. And we talk tenderly about our kids. You just set this YouTube channel up. We're just spending time with your kids doing games. Big Dad Creates. It's beautiful stuff. It is not what we are portrayed.
No.
My mind is on my kids. I worry about my daughters all the time. It's not what people think. But I think the movement is we just live it out.
We're just going to live it out.
Listen to
You can't stop a movement.
No, you can't stop a movement.
It's deep.
Thanks for tuning in. CODELIFE Podcast. Spread the news. Subscribe.
Yeah.
Share it. Put it out on Facebook.
Watch the YouTubes.
Yeah. Don't forget the gathering where these dialogues will continue from the main stage.
And get kitted out and resourced. The manuals.
That's it.
Little box set there, look.
That's it.
You wrote that one, mate.
I did write that one. So
Get yourself going.
Yeah, get yourself going as a new believer. The U version. I've written a few. You've written a few
You've done
now.
loads. Yeah, prayer, Bible, church. What's it all about?
Yeah.
Actually aimed at non-believing guys. Actually, you know, it's easy read, and you can go on the U version Bible app and get a sample of these to do as a devotional for free.
Yeah, loads of stuff on the U version. I actually had a guy email me the other day saying he reads the prayers out to the guys in his from the manuals to his men's group. And we're just in the process of finishing off rewriting the code.
Oh yeah.
So more on that coming up. But look, cvm.org.uk for a whole chunk of resources. The code really is quite a groundbreaking thing. It's really getting out there. So, but also, if you want to stand shoulder to shoulder with 2,500 at least other men in a field near Swindon in June for what is our big festival of all things masculine and Christ, then get yourselves booked in on the website. There's still a bit of time to book in before the prices go up. So.
Yeah, and don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter, Mr. Beachy,
Mr. Beachy,
Nathan Blackerby, and worth saying as well, something about CVM. We are a charity, and one of our regional guys recently, he sent an email out to his mates and just said, "Would you be interested in supporting CVM financially?" It was a bit of a cheeky ask, but his mates were like, "Yeah, we are. Thanks for asking us." Awesome. So our team up in Newcastle supporting us, and we love that.
Yeah, and this movement is growing because you guys out there fuel it, and we are a charity. You know, a few quid a month goes a long way to helping us get out there and keep this thing going, and keeps us on the road and men coming to Christ. So,
that's it, mate.
Cheers, Nathan.
Cheers, BG.